All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We still have a few more folks that will be logging in, but wanted to kick things off. We realize that your time is important, and we want to try to keep on schedule. I just have a few opening comments before we get started. Welcome to the 11 a.m. webinar, Looking for Opportunities in Critical Times, the SBIR STTR program and COVID-19. This is a presentation of the Alabama PTAC, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, in conjunction with the Alabama International Trade Center, with support from Alabama SBC Network and the California SBC Network, the University of California Riverside EPIC SBC, and University of Alabama's Office for Research and Economic Development. I believe the majority of our participants today are from Alabama, though I think if I remember correctly, on the registration list, we did have a few folks joining from California and Georgia. If you are looking for assistance with your company, with your product or service, or are interested in pursuing SBIR, STTR, and need additional technical assistance, or have questions on government contracting, we do recommend that if you're outside Alabama, to talk with the local SBC or local PTAC office in your state. In Alabama, the PTAC program and the SBC program are offered statewide in partnership with many other four-year institutions. The headquarters is at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, as part of that Office for Research and Economic Development. But we've got great partnerships and locations throughout the state, full-time service centers that are working today, taking calls, answering questions from Alabama's small business community. We've got about 40 outreach locations that help us cover the entire state. Most of those are closed at this point with social distancing still in effect, but we look forward to having those reopen in the coming weeks. For now, if you're wanting to get in touch with one of the procurement advisors with Alabama PTAC or an SBC business advisor, the best way is to register online and get connected with them that way. And we're setting up virtual counseling, both with Zoom calls like this, but also via telephone and, of course, via email. A quick snapshot on the Alabama SBC program. While we are in disaster management and business continuity mode right now, the core of what SBC and PTAC programs work to do, helping Alabama's small business community start, scale, grow their business, pursue international trade. International Trade Center, one of the key specialty programs of the SBC, and our Procurement Technical Assistance Center, a separate program designated in Alabama to help companies pursue state, local, federal contracts. Part of that is looking at opportunities with SBIR, STTR program. A quick side note, the SBC programs are funded in part through a cooperative agreement with U.S. Small Business Administration. We are not the SBA and do not have any impact on any of the disaster loan programs or any of the STTR, SBIR programs that SBA is engaged with, but we provide technical assistance in working with companies to access these programs. Many of y'all are already familiar with SBC through and the PTAC through the work that we've done in the last several weeks on disaster assistance. And if you do have questions about disaster assistance, that is a separate webinar. We will not be covering that, the EIDL loans or the PPP loans directly in this webinar. So last couple of disclaimers before we begin. The PTAC is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with Defense Logistics Agency, and all the opinions, conclusions, recommendations expressed are those of the authors, do not necessarily reflect those of SBA, DLA, University of Alabama, I think it's fair to say, or UC Riverside. So with us today, we have our guest speakers are Dr. Martin Kleckner with University of California Riverside and the EPIC SBDC, and Misty Madero also works with those programs. And they will be talking to us today about SBIR, STTR opportunities, specifically related to COVID-19, and then more broadly about best practices about these programs. Martin is a serial entrepreneur, so a great fit for SBC and PTAC, and has worked with many companies. I believe the numbers are some $60 million in federal and private funds over the last 6 years, working with companies on 16 SBIR grants. I'm going to step out of the way. Thank you for the feedback on the audio. I believe, thankfully, our guest speaker has much better audio, and so I will get out of the way now and let them begin. Martin?
Unmute. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to try something which is not a natural act and share screen. So let's give it a go. And there we are. Terrific. All right. Fantastic. Okay. Is everybody able to see the screens and hear?
Yep.
Good to go?
Yes,
Terrific.
we'll see the full PowerPoint screen. There you go.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So welcome. This is very much indeed an honor. I look forward to speaking with you today. And I know that we only have about an hour and a half. And so for mostly humanitarian reasons, I'm going to do my very best to not do all the talking. But let's see if we can take advantage of that and move forward. So just a brief introduction on who we are out west. We are part of the 10 campus University of California system. And like you, like Mike had just introduced, we also are a key component of the research and economic development. We are part of the Office of Technology Partnerships at the University of California, Riverside. And our aim is to catalyze translation of university research, but a substantial portion of our work is also to guide opportunities for regional business enterprises as well. And so our mission is encompassing technology commercialization, formation of corporate and strategic partnerships, all in the name of innovation and entrepreneurship, capitalization, private equity, by way of VCOCs, hedge funds, and so forth, grant funding opportunities, formation of critical strategic alliances. And we are also a National Science Foundation I-Corps site, part of the NLA node out of Los Angeles, which consists of USC, Caltech, and UCLA. We also have within our research and economic development an Office of Tech Partnerships SBIR Resource Center. And so from that perspective, we'll be discussing the non-dilution funding that is of key interest to most of our researchers here and in the surrounding community. And I'm absolutely certain likewise for you as well. So just a brief overview on who's doing the talking today. I think all this really tells you is that I'm a gray hair and I've walked around the block several times. As Mike had indicated, I have been a co-founder or an early participant in 5 startups. 2 of ended up in exit liquidity events. I'm also a nationally trained I-Corps instructor, got my training in Arlington with the National Science Foundation, and also served as a chief operation officer for a not-for-profit entity for about 3 years, focusing on childhood and adolescent cancers. I have worked with just about every agency offered by the federal government throughout University of California and other universities as well. Have a substantial background in corporations as well, and a few of those are listed. And as Mike had indicated, we're chasing after $60 million, at least on my end, in a combination of private equity grants and capital as well. I thought that I'd focus today on these topics, and I realize we've got a grand total of an hour and a half, and I would like a good portion of that, frankly, about 30 minutes of that for Q&A. So I'll do the very best to march through this. And this is actually a component of what we offer typically as a 16-hour marathon where we do deep dives in just about every topic and others that we won't be talking about today. So just expect us to keep everything at a pretty high 30,000 foot level. So we're going to start off with the basics, and then I'd like to flip into specific, not all of them, not all encompassing the funding opportunity announcements for COVID-19 and what the several agencies are looking for, what the submission process is, and pertinent protocol guidelines and procedures that would be of key interest to you. We'll go through the COVID-19 sample opportunities, and then we'll get into what I think are might be of interest to you, and that is the lessons that we've learned over the years in terms of best practices, certain steps to avoid, the high value of strategic partnerships and so forth, and other areas that the study sections and the reviewers are looking for on a continuous basis. As I indicated, mostly for humanitarian reasons. I like to limit my talking, and it's always proven to me to be very impactful and important if we spend a lot of time with action back and forth. Now, given that we only have about an hour and a half, while I will encourage you to jump in with questions and so forth, we might have to keep that semi under control and put our blinders on and look toward the end of the presentation for Q&A. So it's your discretion on whether you wanted to hop in and ask a question pertaining to any particular slide, or if you wanted to hold your questions toward the end, that's perfectly okay by me. So why don't we delve into the basics first? And many of you are probably familiar already with the SBIR and the STTR. They've been around for a while, SBIR for 38 years and STTR for 28 years. And as you may know, a Congress has authorized or mandated a certain percentage of the research funding that is allocated on an annual basis to research federal agencies. 3.2% for SBIR of all the research that is authorized relative to funding is available to us as small business concerns. And likewise is the case for the STTR, albeit it's a smaller percentage. But these are restricted to the 5 agencies that have over $1 billion in research. The distinguishing characteristic between SBIR and STTR is that the STTR requires that there is a collaboration of the research done between us, the small business concern, and a not-for-profit research entity. Typically, it's a research university, such as the University of Alabama. So there are 11, as I'd indicated, 12 if you consider the 2 separate entities of the Department of Commerce. And the distinguishing characteristic here is that, as you may recall, we had a bit of a bugaboo called the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009, and angel investors took a little bit of a hiatus and backed off. And so the federal agencies, again, by way of congressional mandate, took over the role of being our seed funder for a good portion of the innovations that are going on throughout the country. So that's why you'll see that logo that you could see in the prior one, America's Seed Fund. And that is indeed the case. And in fact, private angels now rely increasingly and extensively on the work that we do, the funding that we receive, and the findings that we discover and so forth by way of the research funded by these federal agencies. So they are keenly interested and set great store by that. So these are what the numbers generally look like right now. This is for fiscal year 2020. And I can't really say exactly what's going to be available for us in FY 2021, but I think it will be comparatively the same with slight increases in most. Now this past year, there were 3 agencies, especially education and EPA, that took a bit of a hit. I think that NSF and the Department of NASA are going to be turning around, and their funding is most likely going to be increasing for fiscal year 2021. and beyond. And I'm not exactly certain what the story is going to be for the EPA and education. But for the most part, these numbers will most likely increase, albeit ever so slightly, for 2021. So anyway, here's what the phase one success rate story has looked like over the past 5 or so years. And some of you may say, well, gee, that's not a pretty good idea. But if you compare it to the odds of getting funded for seed by private angel clubs, angel groups, or high net worth individuals, which, as you are probably aware, the chances of getting funded that way are most likely 1% or less for 1%. So all things considered, 15 to 18% is not bad, pretty good chances. And a portion of those, I think the agencies tell me that it's ballpark around 45%. I think it's a little bit less than that, and increasingly less. I think the odds of getting phase one funding is slightly better than what you're seeing right now. The odds of getting phase two succession funding is getting a little bit more competitive and much more difficult. So here are the characteristics. Phase one, as many of you probably know, is feasibility and proof of concept. And those are the numbers that you see below. It's basically 6-9 months. The funding varies on a per agency basis. The 256,000 and change that you see there, that's the National Science Foundation. The numbers look a little odd, but they also include a cost of living adjustment, which occurs on an annual basis as well. So it's on a case-by-case funding opportunity announcement, FOA announcement specific. There are hard cap waivers, which means that the funding that is authorized for phase one can go up to by approximately an additional 50%, but again, it's a case-by-case basis there. The National Institutes of Health could be even greater than that. And I have been able to secure north of $300,000 for initiatives that the NIH has taken keen interest in. For phase two, it's about 1.7. Having said that, there again is that waiver that can take us up to $2.5 million. And that is proof of efficacy. Those are testing for larger cohorts of patient populations or target audiences, depending upon the agency that we're working with. There are also sequential funding, phase 2B, for the NIH, energy, and defense, because those initiatives are typically a heck of a lot more costly and comprehensive than might be the case for the other agencies. And in addition to that, there may be special and supplemental funding. For example, as you may know, the National Science Foundation for phase two, as we're reaching the completion of our deliverables, will offer matching funds up to $500,000 if we are able to secure private equity funding to move forward in phase two and so forth. Likewise, an additional $200,000 and change if we need to proceed with some additional discovery research and so forth. And the Department of Energy sometimes will offer supplemental funding if it behooves them to encourage universities to take an interest in a particular topic that they would like to see some advancements on. So to be eligible, you got to be a for-profit. You've got to be headquartered, located within the United States of America. I think most of us qualify that our small business concerns do not have 500 employees. So that's good news. You do have to be a permanent citizen, or you can be a permanent resident alien. And that is defined by either a green card or substantial presence. And substantial presence means that we have to have resided and be conducting work over the past 3 years of 183 days, which include 31 days in current year 2020. So those are not really daunting challenges. And so many of the researchers, I suspect, at the University of Alabama, certainly at the University of California, they do qualify for substantial presence. Now, a third of the work can be subcontracted. I wanted to clarify, however, what the term employment really means. Your PI does not actually need to be truly employed within your small business concern. What it really means is dedication to the performance of the project that is proposed and funded. So that means that once the funding has arrived, been deposited in your bank, that private investigator must dedicate his or her time over 50% up through the completion of the final deliverables. And that's all that employment really means. So you do not have to worry about health benefits or anything that may come into play there. On the other hand, if you end up liking working together, that individual, and you may decide to join forces, and that PA may actually join your small business concern to continue work, which I see happens quite a bit. The eligibility for STTR, technology transfer, is generally the same. The organization needs to be a resident of the United States. Research partners do, however, it's a mandate, need to be a not-for-profit university, University of Alabama, for example, University of California, or a not-for-profit domestic research organization, or a federally funded R&D center as well. You do have to form an IP sharing agreement, and this may come as no surprise to you. And the University of Alabama Tech Transfer, I'm pretty certain, has a template IP agreement that if you were to work with them on a joint STTR project, you both would have to reach an agreement and sign that document, and that has to be included in the content of the STTR proposal submitted to the respective agency. So those are the limits there, 40 to 70% that we need to perform as a small business concern, and the University of Alabama or not-for-profit partner needs to do anywhere between 30 and 60. So if each of you were to do the 40 and 30 respectively, that allows for, my math works correctly, an additional 30% that you can bring in outside firms or consultants to do additional research and so forth. The PI in this case does not need to be dedicated as a 1099 or otherwise to your small business concern. And more often than not, it ends up being a PI that is a researcher or faculty member at the university. So registration, it's a bit of a bear, it's a bugaboo, and it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to occur, and that's not our fault, it's pretty much them. And if any of you who have gone through this, you'll see that the system for awards management can be a little bit hairier than normal. What happened a couple of years ago, quite frankly, is that there were some hackers. I think they came out of Ukraine and other countries, where for some reason that we were not amused about is that funding that was awarded to us was actually ending up in a bank account on the other side of Earth. And so Sam had to resort to manual processes, which includes us manually getting a notary public to indicate that we are indeed who we claim to be, and that needs to be sent in to the system for awards management as well. By the end of this year, they are no longer going to be requiring us to be registered with Dun & Bradstreet. We will have to be registered as a unique entity or with a unique entity identifier. That's going to start in December 2020. We still, as a private business, small business concern, may still need to secure a DUNS number for other reasons, but the system for award management, SAM, will no longer be requiring DUNS. They'll be requiring a UEI in place of that. So I thought I'd share with you at a fairly high level what's important to these 4 agencies, but it is equally applicable to the other 7 agencies as well. And even though the columns look a little bit different, they really are looking for the same qualifications and credentials and demonstration that we've got the caliber and the capability to perform the proposals that we have submitted. Several of the items that you see are comparable. The study approach, of course, has to be absolutely rock solid. in form of research design, methodology, aims, and so forth. The team has to be absolutely qualified and credentialed relative to the proposed project. NIH, also, we need to demonstrate to them that the initiative they're proposing actually presents as significantly of interest to the U.S. market, that our innovation actually is distinguishable. It has to be disruptive. I know that's pretty much the lay of the land and the law ever since Clayton Christensen at Harvard and Joseph Schumpeter earlier at Harvard also had inserted those discontinuous innovation and disruptive terms. So tongue-in-cheek, it's kind of like the law. And study approach, again, the team has to be absolutely rock solid and trustworthy, and being able to not only design the research, but manage it well all the way through the completion of deliverables. Likewise is the story with the Defense Department. As many of you may have thought, that now these are contracts, by the way, with the DoD, but they do want us to demonstrate in our commercialization plan that in addition to contracting with the DoD, we are also going to be reaching out and developing our market in the civilian market as well. National Science Foundation, intellectual merit, team, qualifications, researches, it's pretty much the same. So I thought I'd share with you also a couple of the distinguishing characteristics between the National Institutes of Health. This is the only one that does a scoring system. And the marching orders to the reviewers are that the 5 criteria that you see on the left side, they are evaluated in every section of our proposal. So they consider how significant, how innovative our approach is, and our technology, whether or not the investigators have the right credentials, and whether we have the right environment in the form of facilities and equipment in order to perform the research that we are proposing to them. So those 5 criteria are considered in every section that you see on the right side, starting with title and abstract. And if any of you understand anything about human behavior, the first thing they do is they'll look at the title, they'll look at the abstract, and even before they start examining the research design and strategy and so forth, they'll flip down into the biographies in terms of who exactly is performing this research and so forth. Then they flip up into specific aims and research and so forth. It's just common human nature to make a decision on who's going to be doing the work before they get into the details of the study context and so forth. The overall impact is not a sum of the parts. It's a separate evaluation that the reviewers make in terms of whether or not what we are proposing to produce in our study and transition or translate into the commercial market will indeed have a sustainable, viable, powerful influence on the field, but also on the commercial market. So they also need to offer an assessment and a grade to that as well. It's a pretty rigorous dual peer review system, and it is twofold. And I have served on several occasions as a Part 2 Advisory Council Board. They basically send out to me proposals that they are seriously considering funding, and their question to me is whether or not I feel that what is being proposed is a dog that can actually hunt and actually have a sustainable viability in the commercial or clinical market or otherwise. So it's pretty rigorous, and what you will be receiving if you have not participated in NIH reviews before is that you will be a yes or no if you are scored, a go or no go if you are scored. You will receive a 10 or so page report with an assessment of the proposal, its strengths and its weaknesses relative to the 5 criteria that I had referenced in the prior slide. The additional review criteria, we don't have to do a heck of a lot in terms of a commercialization plan. In fact, it's a grand total of about 2/3 of a page. where we need to just simply present commercial potential and so forth. The commercialization plan gets a little bit more comprehensive and is robust and ranges anywhere from 12 to 15 pages. And we'll get into that just a little bit further. So as I had indicated, the NIH is a scoring system. And the score that we receive is actually those that you see in that second column on the left and multiplied by 10. Any of us who gets a score in the mid and even sometimes to the high 20s, we have a pretty good, excellent chance of getting funded. Anything 3 to 9, 30 to 9, that is to say, probably it's going to be a tougher call and we may not get funded. Even though you see there that a 30, 3 times 10, may be ranked as excellent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get the buy-in and the funding received. But it is, again, on a case-by-case basis. You don't want to be in some of the others, especially not discussed or not recommended for further action. I am aware of one applicant who did get an NR, and she did indeed deserve that NR. But there are indeed opportunities. If we do not get funded the first time, we do have an opportunity and are indeed encouraged to resubmit our proposal. And based upon the comments provided by the 3 reviewers, again, I mentioned that we get a report back 10 to 13 pages where the 3 reviewers give a fairly comprehensive appraisal of where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. And as we submit our second submission, we are required to address those concerns that they had provided us. So as it turns out, the reviewers who consider our applications, for the most part, they are human. And that means this may be a surprise to many of us, a bit of a surprise to none of us, a few. And that is, of the 3 criticisms or reviews that we get, one may have a different opinion. There may be 2 who generally like what we're proposing. There may be 1 who has an issue with what we're proposing. And I can tell you again that the study section will most likely defer to the individual who has negative impressions or sees too many weaknesses within our proposal. And that typically will end up, unfortunately for us, as being the deal killer. That pretty much is common behavior, by the way, for private equity angel groups concerning as well. Now, I did this graphic as a means to demonstrate the sharing of knowledge and understanding. You're all probably seeing Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but that really wasn't my impression or intention, that is to say. So what they are looking for as well, and the NSF focuses on science and engineering prevailingly, but what they're looking for is creative, original, transformative, and the caliber of our proposed study has to be very carefully laid out. The study approach, the rigorous study and scalability and repeatability that the NIH is looking for is every bit equally sought for by the National Science Foundation as well. And they set great store by, frankly, whether or not the team that we have developed has the right qualifications and the credentials to do the job. The National Science Foundation has been striving for several years now to become much more efficient and productive. This is an agency that is probably one of the most flooded with proposals. And in fact, many of the proposals that they had received were of not the quality that they were seeking. So they developed a new process where we need to submit a project pitch first. And it looks just as what you're looking there, and you can access that, and you have to submit that project pitch online in that link that I'm showing up on top. And you need to submit that first. Now, the aim was for them originally to cull out those that they felt might not be of interest or a fit. But my experience is that as long as your pitch makes general logical sense, and may prospectively, based upon the study approach that you design, may be something of interest to them. So more often than not, you will end up getting the go-ahead for that. I don't think I've had any of my clients have their project pitch declined. But nevertheless, we spend, my clients and I, a considerable amount of time even putting together the project pitch. So the submission windows, by the way, are different. We used to have deadlines, and so they were flooded with everybody submitting pitches and proposals at the 11th hour, which drives me bananas, by the way, and it's been a big bugaboo for them as well. So anytime in these windows, you are encouraged to submit your pitch, and you are also encouraged subsequently to submit your full-on proposal, and they will be considering them first come, first serve. So let's flip into the COVID-19 gut punch that we received several months ago. The National Science Foundation issued something what is referred to as a Dear Colleague letter. And that means that they sent a reach out announcement to all of us to submit proposals for accelerated consideration and accelerated funding, accelerated review within a time span of approximately 45 days, and if clearance, receipt of funding within 15 days thereafter. So, based upon the March 25 deadline or the end of May, for example, just simply do the math, and 45 days after the submission of your proposal, you'll receive a go or a no-go, approval or not proposal. And if you are approved, you can expect or hope for funding within 15 days thereafter. And those are the categories of which they are interested in. And it is pretty much across the board. I can tell you that they are keenly interested in human tracing relative to the identification of hotspots and where there are clusters of a high incidence of COVID-19 diagnostics and so forth. We do need to follow the standard guidelines, however. So the project pitch that I had referenced earlier, we do need to submit one expressly pertaining to our proposal here. In order to get to the head of the line, we do need to indicate that this is a COVID-19 proposal. And so we do need to reference COVID-19, and we also need to reference the Dear Colleague letter, NSF 20065, within a part of the field in the project pitch where they're calling for a description of the technology and the innovation. So it's very important that we reference COVID-19 and the Dear Colleague letter in order for us to get put up to the head of the line for immediate consideration. And it does have to go through the FastLane program, which is an online system. So we submit our project pitch online. We need to submit also our proposal through the FastLane program as well. We do also need to have active registration. We do need to be registered by SAM in order to be able to research opportunities and prepare a proposal through their research.gov and so forth. Now, it may be good or bad news for us in that they are shortening the pages that they would like us to spend on putting together our study approach, our research design, methodology, and so forth. 9 pages may be good news for some of us. It may be not so good news for other of us who feel that we need more time to, or I should say more pages to describe our project and so forth. So we can submit our proposal in 15 pages, but they would be much more interested if we restricted our project description, our study approach within 9 pages overall, the entire review. So with regard to the proposals, to the Dear Colleague letter and so forth, it is reviewed exactly the same way all of the non-COVID-19 proposals are reviewed, and that's the merit review criteria that they set store by. Take a look at those. By the way, you are all going to be receiving these slides, because I know that I'm going through these pretty darn quickly. So anything that you see in blue, you can click on, and it will take you to that area of interest in terms of how reviewers review and consider and evaluate the proposals and so forth. And you'll see the peer review guidelines underneath there. So again, awards are ideally within 6 weeks. And again, the National Science Foundation has been utterly inundated with proposals, but they are doing the very best they can in order to meet the 45 and an additional 15 days for a total of 60 days turnaround for funding and so forth. And for those of you who offer a proposal expressly pertaining to diagnostics, screening, treatment, crowd tracing and so forth, you probably can plan for and anticipate a rapid turnaround of 60 days. So we work very closely with you on these proposals, both the project pitch and the development of the proposal, and I'm absolutely confident that the same is done at the University of Alabama as well. So what I thought I would do is share with you a sampling of the funding opportunities that are expressly pertaining to COVID-19. Many of them are not going to be applicable to you. However, several others will be more applicable to you. I list these with the NIH, but the distinguishing characteristic with the NIH here is that these are available for the most part only for those who have already been who are already in receipt, that is to say, of an award. So they have an active award, and they are being invited to offer supplemental research initiatives and so forth, where they would be essentially repurposing their technology with a specialized focus, blinders on toward COVID-19. So the notices of special interest, there are specific requisites. And now increasingly, there are several that are now being released that do not require that you have an active award, which is very good news for those of us who do not have an award that has been activated where we're receiving funding. And one of them has to do with Andrew Fauci's department, the NIAID, and it was released just a couple of weeks ago. And this pertains to any innovation, any solution that you have for screening, for diagnostics, for vaccination, for therapy, for crowd tracing, whatever the case may be, to manage the infectious disease. Again, expedited review and award within the 60 days. Any area of the virus that you can offer an opportunity or a solution for critical aspects, they are keenly interested in taking a look at that. It's accepted on a rolling basis, and the period of award is at least a minimum of 1 year, but depending upon the announcement, the funding opportunity, it may last for anywhere from 1 year to even up to 5 years. There are also sub-entities, that is to say, various sub-agencies of the NIH, and one of this was just released last May 7th, and I thought I was the only one going nuts with home confinement, but maybe there are others in the country as well. But all tongue-in-cheek aside, this is something that is of keen interest to them with regard to psychosocial factors of connectivity and isolation of our well-being and so forth. So any of you who have an interest in that are encouraged to submit, and you can submit all the way through 2021, March 17. And if you are interested, take a look at Public Announcement 19373 or PA 19384 for details on that. You do not have to have an active award in order to consider and submit a proposal in that space. Again, there is no limits to the budgets here. So as I mentioned earlier, for traditional SBIRs, there might be a ceiling in terms of how much we can propose for a phase one, but consider that these can be, for the most part, tantamount to an equivalent of a so-called fast track, which means that you are proposing an accelerated opportunity here, and that they will be open to considering prospectively a direct to phase two, which means that you do not need to perform a proof of concept or feasibility for phase one, or you may also propose what's called a fast track, which is a combination of phase one and phase two. As is typically the case with the NIH, however, you do need most likely to have precursor data that you have to have performed work in your lab or elsewhere in order for them to consider. This is not a start from scratch for the most part with the NIH. Another one has to do with, and this is just simply an example, but if any of you are interested in solutions in the dental field, dental practices for safety of personnel and patients, the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial has an interest in looking at your proposal. Equally of interest is research on women's health as well. So both of those entities are funding this. And the due dates are June 1, just around the corner, sadly, but also November the 2nd. So for anyone who works with me, I will do my very best to discourage them from pursuing the June 1, because it is frankly just around the corner, and I am all interested in quality versus speed. So anyone who works with me on this one, we would be pursuing November the 2nd, not June the 1st. We do need to comply with standard NIH guidelines, and if any of you are interested, I'm more than happy to send what those guidelines are to you. It's a rolling basis consideration, again, period of award for 5 years. So no matter how you slice it, I always, for multiple reasons, encourage us to reach out to program staff, program directors, program managers, and so forth, if for no other reason, pollination. Get to know them get to know us. And this has actually worked out very well for me in that sometimes members of the study section, before it gets into the formal process where they no longer can engage with us in a direct conversation, but I've been able to, at least a few of my clients, to engage in teleconferences for them to talk about the proposal that we're submitting, and for them to offer insights with regard to areas that they would be most keenly interested. So I can't underscore enough how important it is to reach out to the program director. You can find that individual's name, telephone number, email address on most, if not all, of these funding opportunity announcements. Can't underscore that enough. There are updates, and they're also being increasingly flexible, that if for some reason we are not able to meet imposed deadlines, they originally were accepting deadlines that were ranging anywhere between the 9th of March and the 1st of May. Everything was being accepted through May 1st. Now, on a case-by-case basis, for those of us who may not even be able to meet the May 1 deadline, on a case-by-case basis, another reason to reach out to the program director to see if they would be willing to allow us to submit a proposal a few weeks or thereabouts after the 1st of May. Always take a peek at, on a regular basis, every couple of days, there are FAQs that are submitted all the time, and it may be germane in interest to us. So I certainly encourage you to stay on top of that and tap into the FAQ link that you see below to see if there are any questions and topics of discussion that might be pertinently of interest to you. Facilities or flexibilities available to applicants, again, as I indicated before, relative to deadlines. The same is the case here. Continue to tap into this link here that I'm showing you to see if there may be some additional requests for flexibilities and so forth for applicants. We're all in a very, very tight squeeze in getting quality proposals submitted in a timely fashion. But in that rush, that may bear or present a risk of compromising the caliber of our study approach. They don't want it, we don't want it. So stay on top of this, reach out again to your program director and see if there may be some additional flexibilities to enable you to submit the highest caliber proposal that you possibly can. Tap into the link below as well to see if others have had similar requests and whether or not there was a response to them that might be applicable or germane to you as well. Let's take a peek at a couple of other opportunities. This is the first one of the original ones that was announced, and this is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. These encourage public-private partnerships. And I should also say that generally across the board, the NIH, the Department of Energy, the National Science Foundation, and several of the other agencies, they are increasingly keenly interested in the formation of partnerships between universities and small business concerns. And the reason for doing this is that this actually eases the risk to them of the chances of our innovation, our technology, of succeeding in a viable, lucrative, and a sustainable way in the commercial market. So anytime that we offer, and it doesn't just have to be an STTR, anytime that we can offer a proposal to them which includes a partnership with industry, our chances of getting an award are increased materially. Now, if you have an idea that you would like to have a conversation with them before you submit your full-on proposal, you can do that. And you can do that by tapping into the link below. It's called TechWatch. And so if you have a COVID-19 countermeasure, it's kind of like a militaristic term, I guess, in a warfare sense relative to COVID-19. You do, by the way, this is not a light bulb start from scratch opportunity with BARDA. So if you have made some progress, even if it's in the lab or elsewhere, non-clinical trials, but you have available data and findings, you might have a minimum viable product or a prototype, and you have a capability for current good manufacturing practices, then practices, that is to say, please don't hesitate to reach out to TechWatch. The good news there is that it's a tremendous way to gain visibility. As you probably gathered, I am a major advocate for pollination and getting to know and building a relationship with the program directors back east in Arlington or Bethesda or wherever the case may be. Get feedback from their experts in terms of what they're looking for, how a study approach ought to be designed that could be of interest to them, and have them provide to you their interest in what they're looking for in terms of tactics, strategies, and so forth, and get insight that would be immensely valuable and heighten your chances. So I encourage you highly that if BARDA is of consideration to you, take advantage of BARDA's TechWatch opportunity to meet with some of their experts with regard to heightening the quality and caliber of your proposal. So let's take a look at some additional other ones. And the first one has to do with the AHRQ. Now, the first two are for revisions or additions to active grants. So many of us may not be in those shoes. So I would encourage you to take a peek at the one down below. AHRQ has a keen interest in digital health innovations. And on top of that, they have a keen interest in offering opportunities that will enhance the opportunities for productivity, efficiencies, and heightening of clinical results, clinical outcomes from how they operate. So if any of you are members of a research, a medical center, a healthcare system, hospital network, something like that, or if you are a business enterprise that would have an interest in collaborating with, say, the University of Alabama Medical Center and so forth, this may indeed be a great opportunity for you. The Air Force Works actually is a recent vintage accelerator that was developed about 3 years ago, that is to say, pardon me, and it is to encourage entrepreneurship within the Air Force as well. But it also is a means to encourage a collaborative effort between entrepreneurs within the Air Force and also with us. So those are the 5 focus areas that they are keenly interested in. Now, the initial Air Force Works, they've got 3 accelerators. One is in Boulder, Colorado. The second one is in Austin, Texas. And the third one is located about 3 blocks away from the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. area. The application period did indeed end a few weeks ago, but I would encourage you to reach out to them nevertheless, because I believe that they are considering reopening and accepting new proposal opportunities as well. It's a tremendous opportunity to collaborate with innovative entrepreneurs within the Air Force, but also for the Air Force to be an ultimate customer of yours as well. This is another one where the interest is in forming partnerships, research agreements, and so forth between industry and academia and us. And so we do need to join the MCDC. Those are the areas, technical areas of interest that they are keenly interested below. So join the MCDC, you will be receiving and being able to correspond with other members of the MCDC to find opportunities in those areas, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. Again, sounds militaristic, but nevertheless, it's a war against COVID-19. So, but even more importantly, it's a tremendous opportunity to form a collaborative effort between industry and academics and not-for-profit partners as well. And I did not mention also there are several of the other agencies, NIH and the National Science Foundation, as examples that also offer special funding for those of us in the academic world who are interested in forming a relationship with industry and so forth. Here's another one out of the Boston area, and it's called the Newton Award. 10 awards offered, ballpark around $50,000 or maybe up to $100,000. So take a look at that as well. Also, other funding opportunities. Johns Hopkins has 2 of them. MIT has an Elevate Prize Award as well. Might be worth looking into to see if there's a fit for you. Mozilla has put on hold accepting others right now. This has to do with open source software and so forth. They just got flooded with applications in their initial 2 weeks, so they closed off accepting other ones, but they may indeed be opening them up as well. Various corporations have grant programs as well, and those are areas that many of us are not even aware of. Pfizer is an example. There are other life science focused corporations that offer competitive grant programs as well. This is a tremendous opportunity to gain an alliance, again, with an industry partner and have them ultimately end up as being prospectively a licensee or another type of strategic partner with you. The X-Tech COVID-19 Venture Challenge is still ongoing. Albeit the submission end is just a couple of weeks down the road. But if you are interested and you have an idea for an innovative ventilator, now's your chance. So overall, there are others, and I just simply tapped into the tip of the iceberg, including the Centers for Disease Control. We have compiled a list of 75 FOAs and RFPs. And Misty and I are more than happy to share that list with you and see if after going through that list, there may be an opportunity. Number one that I did not mention, but number two, one that might be of keenly interest to you. So let me wrap up with those opportunities. Let's just go back to the basics and have me share with you lessons learned. And Michael, by the way, holler at me if you feel that I'm overrunning time here. I don't think I've got a clock set in front of me here. But let me tell you where I think are the most important. I can't underscore enough how critical letters of endorsement and letters of support are. This actually became increasingly important after the 2008 and 2009 Great Recession. I can tell you that we angel investors, such as yours truly, thought we were among the most smartest individuals in the whole world in being able to discern what is a good investment opportunity and what is a not so good investment opportunity. But after the Great Recession, when those of us lost a heck of a lot of money, nowadays we need to sneak up to the mirror every morning because we're staring at our images in the mirror while we're brushing in teeth. We're looking at one of the we've ever seen in our lives. So that being noted, these letters of support are evidence that you have reached out to prospective customers, realistic customers, strategic partnerships, and so forth, who have vetted you and are willing to write a letter indicating that if you get funded, they will be first in line, elbows flailing, to get access to your technology innovation. That means a great deal of us because it is a way for we risk-averse investors to feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy about the chances that we'll be taking with your innovation. The study approach, for those of us who have not been formally trained, say as an MD, as a PhD, as a master's student, and so forth, we may not have been trained on how to design a study, a research project, or a study approach, and that is indeed a deal killer. So this is where I get heavily involved on study approach personally, content-wise, and we go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until I'm feeling comfortable that they have designed a research methodology with all that needs to come into play for that to be something that would be seriously and realistically considered by the study section. The team is critical, and in an ensuing slide, I'm going to indicate that at least 65% of the time, I respectfully ask the team, and they almost universally say, let's go for it, to fortify the team, to add individuals who may have credentials and qualifications that the team may not possess, but that the study section would be looking for. The commercialization plan, on the other hand, is a bit of a bugaboo for academicians because they are not necessarily trained there. So in an I-Corps sense, all agencies are looking for a discussion of business model generation. Despite what you see in the FOA, we speak I-Corps now, and so our commercialization plan needs to address the opportunity and our plan of transitioning from the lab into the commercial market in a sustainable, viable, lucrative way. We often need to bring in an experienced CEO who knows the market, has relationships, has a Rolodex, not afraid to use it. All of these are very, very important. I find also, by the way, that significance and innovation, we just don't seem to always do a good job here. And I want you to keep in mind that this is not just simply a proposal to perform research. It is equally a sales documentation. So we need to be crystal clear and very telling in terms of how we can convince them that the proposal, that the innovation that we are submitting to them is indeed significant, has a material impact nationwide. It's an innovation that is not just simply an incremental advancement of existing knowledge, but it's something that may be a discontinuous innovation or disruptive or otherwise, and has sustainable value. And I've already indicated that I cannot underscore enough how important letters from targeted stakeholders are to the proposal. Reviewers set the greatest store by that. And these are letters, by the way, that you can write yourself and have them either sign off on it or they can edit. And we have numerous examples of those of the most effective. So they want validation. They don't necessarily need to commit to buy into your innovation because you have not demonstrated proof of concept or feasibility. But again, they're saying that if you achieve all of your aims, If your study approach is accomplished in the most appropriate way and your findings and lessons learned are quite germane, they may be very seriously considering buying into your product. Now, phase two, on the other hand, is an evidence of commitment based upon your findings. And these also can be evidence of commitment, not just from stakeholders in your ecosystem, but they can also be evidence of commitment from investors as well on the private equity side as well. It is contingent. It is not a full-on commitment, but the letter pertains to that if you prove efficacy, if you deliver all the milestones that you are proposing in phase two, your efficacy study, they will indeed be highly, highly likely of committing in terms of an investment, a strategic partnership, or otherwise. And oh, by the way, the National Science Foundation, as I indicated before, they will offer matching funds if you can secure private equity investment, or if you need to perform some additional studies with a strategic industry partner who, if you complete those studies with, will buy into the product. Okie doke. So I'm heading in the wrong direction here. There we go. So I'm probably beating this horse to death, but for those of us who are not formally trained, these can be our deal killers. So I bring on individual who may have those skills if we do not have it. I can't underscore enough the importance of the design and methods and so forth, everything that you're looking there. Remember, these are academicians for the most part, with the exception of one or two individuals such as me who evaluate in terms of commercialization potential. So if you do not have that capability or that individual who can address the interests and needs of the academicians, the university-based associates for the most part who are reviewing our application, we got to do that. So I'd say at a minimum, 65% of all the SBIR's teams with whom I work, we end up creating, with their blessings, thank goodness, to bring on individuals who are skilled, have the qualifications, and have the credentials to get that done. The team is critical. And even in phase one, bring in your commercialization experts. They want to know that you are serious in making this translation, this transition out of your lab into the commercial market. Very important. So these are the bits of information that they would be asking for that commercialization plan. And in phase one and phase two, you can see there is, of course, a heavy dose emphasis of making that translation or transition into the market. But you will see also that the National Science Foundation sets great store by that. They are heavily, heavily, heavily interested in commercialization. So we have to put in a rock solid commercialization plan, not as robust or comprehensive as phase two, but nevertheless 6 to 8 pages. And again, all of my clients, we speak ICOR, and so we present our business model generation, market capture, market development in that way. Energy is equally interested as well, not exactly requiring the same amount of volume and so forth. The good news is that these federal agencies have contracted out to several consulting firms around the country. The NIH is contracted with Science and Technology Associates out of Providence, Rhode Island, and in Massachusetts. There is Dawnbreaker out of the Denver or Boulder, Colorado, and then there is LARD, LARDA, out of Los Angeles. Each have contracted with the federal agencies to provide various levels of support, either for phase one awardees or phase two and or phase two awardees as well. Very, very valuable commercialization assistance programs and so forth. These are free of charge. The agencies pay for those, but definitely encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities. What I'm finding is that our comp plan is not well written, so that's why they offer those prior consultants firms. And this is why people such as yours truly spend not only an inordinate amount of time on your study research design, but also on your commercialization plan. So this is an area where we would go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until we're all feeling warm and fuzzy that we're more than ready to press on the send button and move forward. So we're also finding that the commercialization plans may still be exposing themselves or be exposed to risk because we wrote our business plans within the confines of our lab or our office. So in 2012, the National Science Foundation and in the ensuing years, the NIH, Homeland Security, USDA, Agriculture, Defense, and Energy have also developed what are called I-Corps programs. And the University of Alabama, I believe, has 2 sites. These are very, very important. The University of California, Riverside as well. We are an I-Corps site. Now, I will tell you that the National Science Foundation is reconstructing its structure. And my understanding, not confirmed, that there will be 5 or more, 7, 8 or so nodes, or I guess they're called something other than nodes these days. And there will be alliances or universities that are alliance with them. There will be about 40 around the country. And I wouldn't be surprised if the University of Alabama is selected as one of those. It all depends upon how productive you have been in terms of dispatching graduates from your I-Corps site programs onto national cohorts around the country. So it's the Lean Launchpad Steve Blank methodology. That's pretty much the same one that he initiated at Stanford University and UC Berkeley and so forth. I am indeed a disciple. I've been a nationally trained instructor since 2015 and had an opportunity to teach or mentor at various universities around the country. And the University of California, Riverside is now teaching Lean Launchpad in South America, Chile, and I believe we're moving forward in Colombia and Peru as well. So this is something that you should seriously consider, and I would encourage you to reach out at those 2 links that I've designated up front at the University of Alabama and look into that and see if this might be of interest to you. I will tell you that if you complete an I-Corps program, your chances, now they may not say that, but your chances of getting considered for an SBIR grant are probably higher than they would be otherwise. Also, at least with the NIH, the National Science Foundation, you may also, as part of your SBIR grant, go through a shortened version of a national cohort called a boot camp. With the National Institutes of Health, you have to have been awarded an SBIR grant before you are given an opportunity to participate in a national NIH cohort. So I'll just give you a whirlwind tour on what this is all about. And then again, this came about by Steve Blank and colleagues at Stanford and UC Berkeley. And it has to do with customer discovery and validation and business model generation. None of us are interested in business plans anymore. And in fact, we don't read them when we're considering deal reviews or investor presentations or anything like that. But we do set great store by those who develop an evidence-based business model. And the purpose of a business model is to test and evaluate extensively on whether or not what you are offering in terms of a value proposition and every other of those 9 components that you see below do indeed create the value that meets the desired needs, addresses the hurts, wants, needs, and so forth of your target customers. And by the way, understand every critical key stakeholder within that ecosystem as well. Very, very important stuff. And so you will go through a process of what is called customer discovery, and then ultimately at a national cohort level, you're being asked, by the way, to conduct very comprehensive and structured customer discovery experiments, also known as informational discovery interviews. Toward the tail end, when you get to ballpark around your 65th interview, I mentioned 100 again, you may be getting into what's called customer value validation, where you may be conducting test sales. The purpose of this is that if you do it right, if you go through the I-Corps program at both the site level at the University of Alabama and then at a national cohort somewhere around the country, say, for example, at Georgia Tech University, where I've taught or observed a couple times, this lowers investor risk because what your findings are evidence-based information. The customers, prospective customers with whom you met are essentially the ones who end up writing entirely your business model, and investors set great store by that. Now, I've been sitting in on a weekly or at least a monthly basis to investor presentations as an angel. And while there are templates that we are all required to present our overture to investors from, there really are three essential questions that I have noticed being asked by angel investors over and over again. And these are the three. What is your business model? How did your business model come about? And the answer is I-Corps. And what traction have you gained so far? Again, this is a risk-averse, risk-loss aversion tactic or technique on investors. And I referenced again how we behave now, especially post-Great Recession. And now while we as angel investors are becoming more active, we still are looking toward SBIR, and we're looking at I-Corps as something that we want to occur prior to our consideration. And it also is an opportunity to reduce the risk that we would certainly like to minimize as great as possible. I borrowed this from Paul Grahn, Y Combinator up in the Silicon Valley area. And this is the story that all of you will be going through, especially as you prepare your SBIR, but in particular, as you go through your I-Corps experience. And let me share you an experience with one of my very best friends when I had gotten out of college, Mike Wan, when we had decided that we were going to buy every Midas muffler shop in San Diego. So when I say that Mike and I were drunk with enthusiasm, what I really meant was that Mike and I were drunk with enthusiasm. But reality sunk in. And the same is the case with all I-Corps exercises. As we go through our informational interviews and so forth, we find a lot of things that we did not know about, nor did we expect. We learn very important lessons. We gain very critical insights. We may end up doing several pivots. We will iterate. In fact, people ask me, gee, Martin, I don't understand why we have to do 100 interviews. And I ask, well, consider how many, what is the size of a study sample when you're doing research in your lab or otherwise? And the answer is, oh. So it is very discouraging. It can be a tremendous eye-opener. It can be very difficult. Your first 5, 10, 15 interviews can be indeed a struggle. That's where you are in the trough of sorrow there. That dip, that abyss that you see to the right of experimenting and pivoting, that is a critical juncture for all of us. That's when you and your partners end up seriously considering breaking up. It's almost like a divorce. But if you can survive that, and if you can continue pivoting, if you can continue your iterations and make certain that you do your hypotheses correctly, your interviews appropriately, you seriously consider the lessons learned, picked up the right ones, and then translate those into insights gained in terms of what are the most motivational value propositions that will drive them into your camp. You may be able to see things starting to work. You will be able to do more iteration rather than pivoting. You will get to a point of product market fit where investor angels will now be more inclined to give you various serious consideration because you are presenting to them evidence provided expressly by your target audience. So for mostly humanitarian reasons, I'm going to start talking. And Michael, I'll flip it back over to you. And if there are any questions that I can possibly answer, I'd be very happy to see if I can answer a few of them at least.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. This is great information, everything that we were looking for, and I think a whole lot more, especially like the parts going through the different opportunities that are out there, getting people pointed in the right direction. And as you mentioned at the top, we will share the slide deck with participants
Absolutely.
after the webinar. Perfect.
Absolutely. You bet.
So we only had a handful of questions, and so anyone that's online, if you do have a question, use the Q&A box at the bottom, and you can submit your question, assuming we have not already answered it. But just first, a broad question from Derek. How do we get started with this particular program? Or in general, I guess, recommendations on where to start regarding SBIR, STTR.
Sure, absolutely. So hi, Derek. Yeah, you go through a registration process. You may recall that slide where I had that caricature or that cartoon of someone pulling teeth. That's my tongue-in-cheek way of saying we need to go through registration. It's a requisite. We need to get a DUNS number, Dun & Bradstreet. It's sequential, by the way. After we get our Dun & Bradstreet number, we need to then submit a registration with the System for Award Management. Now, as I'd indicated, that's the most difficult one, Derek, because of the hacker situation that they experienced several years ago. So that takes a long time. And you have to get a notarized letter, manual, that has to be mailed in. Now, for the submission of your project pitch, you do not have to have a SAM number at that time. Then you need to go through the other requisites on a per agency basis, such as research.gov for the National Science Foundation. The Department of Energy has other requisites, as does the Department of Defense. So registration is critical. Do it immediately. It does take 6 to 8 weeks. It's not our fault. It's theirs. And they are burdened with a lot of other things to make certain that we are legitimate, kosher, and are eligible and qualified to submit. So we do have an instruction or a guidelines, and if it's okay with Misty, I'm very happy to share that with you as well, which will be a bit of a roadmap that will take you through the process there. But I'll let Misty make that call on whether we can do something
Sure,
like that or not.
we can share that. And also, UCR has an SBIR website. It's sbir.ucr.edu. And we have some of those resources available specifically for SBIR information. And we have a couple other webinars that you can watch for specific, for example, the Navy on our website.
Got it. Okay. Terrific.
Great, thank you. We've got 2 quick questions from Victor, I believe, in Birmingham. Are universities allowed to secure SBIR funding without small business involvement?
The answer is yes and no. The yes is if you form a small business concern. Universities apply for basic research, R01s and so forth, and R21s, and the list goes on. If you want to submit for SBIR, you have to form a business, a small business concern. Hence the DUNS number and everything else with regard to the registration. So universities alone cannot do that. But typically what we find here at the University of California is that researchers and professors will form a startup company. And that startup company then is the one that must submit an SBIR proposal. But universities alone cannot do that.
And then a follow-up on that one, is the SBIR required to compensate the PI as a W-2 employee? And then what are the record-keeping requirements?
They are not required to do I always get my W-9s and W-2s confused and so forth. But it is the SBIR agency funds the small business concern. So that goes to whoever is the key individual, the lead individual with that small business startup. And that small business startup then pays the PI and other subcontractors and so forth accordingly. And I had indicated again that they do not need to be employees as much as fully dedicated, at least 50.1% or 51% if it's an STTR. They can be 1099s contractors, and they can be committed to the performance of the project 50.1% or north of that up to the completion of the final deliverable. But that is not the responsibility of the federal agency. It is the responsibility of the small business concern in terms of how it pays and treats its employees. Now, there is auditing that will go on in phase 2. And so they will certainly be going over your financial records and so forth at that time.
All right.
Did that help? Did that answer the question?
I think so. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
And then let's see, a question from Kay. You had mentioned angel funding a couple of times.
Yeah.
What does the review committee look for when the applicant requests project funding in any proposal?
The question is, will the review committee look at if there is angel funding? Is that?
I think so. It sounds like
okay.
Sort of combined.
The answer is yes. I mean, reviewers and study sections are every bit, well, almost as risk averse as we are as human being angels and so forth. If they see that you have secured or are being supported by way of a letter of support or endorsement from angel investors, that speaks volumes. And that will help them, because what that means to them is that if you have demonstrated evidence-based angel investors who are willing to document that this is something that they are keenly interested in a serious assessment of making an investment, if not already having made that investment, that does indeed heighten the chances for the federal agency to seriously consider offering research funding. They're basing that decision on the fact that if there are angels or strategic partners, not just angels, but corporate partners as well, that if it looks like this can be indeed, if milestones are achieved, if aims are accomplished, to translate into the commercial market, that just makes their life that much bearable, because these agencies are being held accountable by Congress every year when they go hat in hand to get additional funding and so forth. Among Congress's key questions are how many of those have been translated into the commercial market. That, by the way, is another reason why I-Corps was developed, is because Congress was reluctant to fund them if they were not translating a lot of those investments that they had made, those grants, out of the lab into the market.
We had just a comment from Mary Jane Fleming at the Huntsville PTAC, who just wanted to remind folks online that the PTAC can assist with all the registrations for SBIR, STTR, definitely can help with SAM registrations and that entire process. So don't hesitate to reach out to your local PTAC office for help in that area.
That is absolutely terrific, and thank you, Mary Ann. I mean, for people like me, I thought, well, okay, I guess it's kind of a pain in the tail feathers, but it actually can be a hair-pulling, frustrating experience as well. So Mary Ann's and PTAC support, I'd really take advantage of that.
We've got a question from John here. One of the opportunities you presented was via other transaction agreement. Do you have any information on OTAs?
I would read. You're talking about MTech at that time, and so I would. I'd look into MTech, and they will provide you with specifics for that. MTEC, MTEC, excuse me. And likewise for the other one, MCDC, I may have the letters reversed.
All right.
Yeah, they will provide you with all of that.
Let's see, we have a small diagnostic testing development company based in Birmingham, new government funding programs, academic development partner, patents, etc. Well, here's the question. Is there a single resource available to gain more detailed insight and direct assistance in preparing the initial submittals?
The answer is absolutely yes. And I think in one or two of my slides, well, first of all, let me back up. The answer is yes. Each federal agency has what are called guidelines. Now, these are indeed eye glazers. They can be hundreds of pages, but the NIH, NSF, all of the federal agencies have guidelines and templates and very, very specific directions on submitting your proposal. And they've been working very, very hard to make submitting your proposal online as pain-free as possible. So I think I had a reference on a couple of slides, and you can just simply click on it and it'll take you there. It's the 424 guideline, and it walks you through in detail all the processes. Also, by the way, if you take a look at the FOA, Funding Opportunity Announcement, or the RFP, and an RFP typically is contract-based, they're very, very specific in terms of what they want you to do. They're very specific in terms of the sections that they want you to comply, and they are very, very specific in terms of process and protocol, including things such as font, margins, and so forth. So it's all there. And PTAC, I would imagine, or your SBDC can help you with that as well. If not, we're very happy to send those to you, and I'll just take a second just to email it over to you, and we're very happy to do that as well.
Certainly. Thank you. Just had two comments on the OTAs. John's retired from DAU at Defense Acquisition University and could track down an improved OTA briefing to share if anyone's interested.
Fantastic.
OTAs are simplified contracts outside the FAR. And then Mary Jane in the Huntsville office just recommended looking at OTA consortiums.
Fantastic. That's terrific.
And let's see. Follow-up question from Marcus. He was asking is there a local resource or a consultant to assist in preparing the submittals?
Back to you, Michael.
Yeah, that's where you would want to reach out to your local SBDC or your local PTAC, and it depends on the project that you're working on, the type of submittal, whether or not someone at your local office, the folks that are in your backyard, would be able to assist you, or whether or not we need to bump that to one of our other advisors or other procurement specialists elsewhere in the state. Everyone has a slightly different specialization or familiarity with some of the agencies that you might be interested in. So we try to connect you with funds that are most knowledgeable in that area.
Yeah, if you do not have specialists in the SBIR sense right now with enough extensive experience in writing and submitting and winning them, again, this is Misty as our leader. Maybe we can offer you a little bit of support. Maybe in a train the trainer sense or something like that. Maybe we can. I'm going to get myself in such hot water with Misty. She's going to be. I'm making all these. I'm volunteering all this stuff, and there's Misty. She's staring at me right now. I could be in hot water here afterwards, but we'll see.
Mike, this is Carolyn. Just a reminder that we'll be hosting a similar webinar next week with a partner out of Huntsville that's going to go over the application process for applying for SBIR. That will hopefully help new applicants walk through that process.
That's terrific. What Misty and I are experimenting also, by the way, and another SBDC down in San Diego does it expressly pertaining to NIH, is where they offer workshops. They're 10-week, workshops, and it involves multiple teams, ballpark around 10 or 20. And they all meet, now we're doing meeting by Zoom, but they all meet together at the same time. And they go through step by step through the FOA and the 424. So there might be a week where they spend solely on registration. The following time everybody meets may be solely on specific games, preparing your specific games. And the following week may be dedicated to research design, methodology, those types of things. It's still, as far as I'm concerned, in testing mode, but it's also a good opportunity for everyone to share their experiences as well. So the onus is not just on the instructors, but it's an opportunity for each of the participants to share experiences and so forth. And so far, it seems to be working pretty well. Jury is still out, but that might be an option.
All right. Oh, two last questions we see here. Sandra asks, are there any opportunities that are specifically geared towards race or demographics, any sort of set aside, if you will, on SBIR, STTR programs?
The answer is an absolute yes. Across the board, by the way, we are seeking more veterans. We are seeking more involvement in underserved populations. We are desperately seeking, I can't believe I'm saying this, but we are desperately seeking more women leaders. And so those are the three big areas. And there are also proposals, and I think I shared one with you. If I remember correctly, it was the craniofacial and dental. They are seeking women leader entrepreneurs to submit that proposal. And so that was expressly the reason why I had inserted that into our talk today. So on a case-by-case basis, they will designate whether or not the proposal opportunity is seeking more women leaders or underserved areas or otherwise.
Perfect. Thank you. And our last question from Montgomery, Alabama. Can the SBIR program fund small businesses to pay for patent costs, sales and marketing, business development, or other related costs?
The answer for phase one, no. The answer for phase two, yes. However, there is a way to pay for at least a portion of your patent costs, and they can be fairly costly. But for every phase one and phase two award, there is a 7% profit margin that you get. And you can use that in any way that you want. And so that is included in the budget. When you submit your budget for personnel, facilities, equipment, all that stuff, at the bottom, there is a 7% that is available for you as a small business, as a profit margin. Keep in mind, you are a small business. They want you to stay alive. They want you to keep the lights on. So you get 7%. Don't be shy about that. Some people come to me and say, you know what, maybe I'll improve my chances of getting that if I say, well, we're just going to ask for 6.9%. Don't be goofy. Do the 7%. They want you to do that. You can use that, and many of our clients have actually used that 7% to pay for, at least in part, their patent costs. You can, however, in phase two, you can budget for patent expenses.
Perfect. So if there are any other questions, now's your last chance to submit them. Carolyn, do you have any questions? In case. Perfect. Seeing none, we definitely want to take a moment to thank Martin and Misty for joining us today. I definitely appreciate y'all taking time to talk with our folks. Last second question here. Do you have any examples, sample submissions, maybe example submissions?
Yeah, we have a couple.
Okay.
Sure. We'll share a few. Now, I hesitate to share any of our own clients.
Sure.
Otherwise, it ends up looking like the Mueller report, heavily redacted, so you don't get anything out of it.
Nope.
But I do have several from agencies. They're somewhat dated, but at least they'll give you a feel.
Sure.
Sometimes at the University of California, applicants have reached out to their colleagues who have submitted and been awarded as well. And sometimes they're more than willing to share their, what they submitted as well, colleague to colleague. So I'd suggest doing that as well. But otherwise, I'll be very happy to send. Just rattle my cage, Michael, if you don't mind, and
Yes.
remind me of that.
No, much appreciated.
Yeah, and for me and for Misty, this was indeed an honor, and I appreciate you trusting us to meet with you for an hour and a half. And I sincerely hope that we can stay in touch as colleagues.
Thank you.
I've got one question. Let me, Jerry Ellison is the director of the Alabama PTAC program, and he's on the line. Jerry,
Hi,
go ahead.
Thank you, Martin. I just wanted to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to present this webinar today. It's been very, very informative, and I'm sure everyone who participated will gain quite a bit of good information. And just thank you so much for spending the time with our group today.
Well, Jerry, as I say, it was very much an honor in you all trusting us today and in meeting all of you. And as I say, I sincerely hope that we can all stay in touch.
Perfect.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Great. So again, thank all of our participants today. We will make these slides available later today, and a recording, if that's okay with Martin and Misty, we'll make that available to participants as well. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
That will take a little bit of time for it to transcribe and for us to get it posted, but we'll make that available to participants. And like all PTAC and SBC events, you will have a very brief evaluation survey that we'll email you, and we would appreciate any feedback as well as suggestions on additional topics moving forward, whether it's related to commercialization or response to COVID-19. With that, again,
Mike,
yes, Carolyn.
if they have any suggestions on what other topics to include or questions, we could add that into our presentation for next Wednesday. So that will be at the same time next week, co-hosted with Bid Designs on the actual proposal process.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, so if you let us know about that, we'll make sure we get that included in that week, next week's training and in future training events. Again, a huge thanks to our colleagues out in California and for everyone that dialed in today. So that will conclude our webinar. Thank you all so much.
Stay safe, everybody. It's been a pleasure.